Welcome back. So I'm curious how you did with your brainstorming session with your colleagues in part one. Now what we're going to do is move on to part two, which is going to give us a brief review of our last lesson. I'm going to be adding on more innovation tools, and then we're going to have an opportunity to do a much higher level of brainstorming with our final exercise. And this is going to show you exactly how to do creative brainstorming with your teams. So let's begin. Part two, how do we promote creativity and innovative thinking in teams? Let's just do a brief review. Again, in 2016 at Harvard University, I created the optimal innovation process, which helps teams be more creative with brainstorming. It's quick and efficient. It gets rid of innovation suppression because we live in societies where there's lots of rules and that suppresses innovation. We are mimicking high performance teams and how they behave. Oh, as team members, we will be creating idea threads, which is basically taking one little idea out of several ideas that all the members contribute, and then we merge those ideas together in what we call threaded merges. Now, in part one, I talked about the 6 innovation killers, and if you remember, I said there's actually 12. So let's review the first 6. This is people judging you. This is people with negative thinking, being way too pessimistic, people shaming you for your ideas, peer pressure, people comparing your ideas to other people's ideas, people being perfectionists, where your idea just isn't perfect, and so they don't like it since it's not perfect. Well, that's 6. Well, where's the other 6 come from? You. You can do this to yourself, and we usually do. We judge ourselves. We have our own negative thinking. We can shame ourselves. We can give ourselves peer pressure without anyone else doing it. We certainly compare ourselves to others. And if you're a perfectionist like me, that never stops. So that's where the 12 come from. 6 of these innovation killers can come from the outside, other people on your team, but the worst come from yourself. So what I encourage you to do is be mindful when you're doing that, because it doesn't help the team. It doesn't help innovation. So I encourage you to take a vacation from the perfectionism and the judging and the shaming. And your team is going to be important in that role. And I will be sharing at the end of this video how to create innovative environments where you can have more innovative ideas coming out. So just a quick review. We had innovation tool number 1, where you view your problems as challenges or puzzles. That makes it more fun. It also puts you into a more positive frame of mind. And for your homework, some of you chose to play the chair game, where you either took a chair or any other object and you redesigned it. So it made a significant physical redesign so that it looked different, but it still provided the same function that it was originally made for. So the chair would still be a chair that someone could sit in, but maybe the chair that you made in your homework didn't have a back, or it had multiple legs or no legs at all. Innovation tool number 2, it's one of my favorites because you can do so much with it. This is where you move something from one industry to another industry and also explore doing the opposite function with it. So the example we had last week was take the call button on the airplane, bring that somewhere else, perhaps on land into a restaurant, so you could call over the waiter or waitress to put in an order, but that call button could have the opposite function and be a privacy button. You could also put this into hotels, or you could even bring it into the doctor's office, where you say to the doctor, you know, I'm ready, I'm early, or give me more time. The doctor could do the same thing to you. So this is one of my favorite ones because it's so versatile. And if you recall in innovation technique number 3, it's tempting to see what other teams are doing, what other people are doing in the space. However, that, in my experience, will limit you into where your creativity can go, because the suggestions put you into the space. For example, the Chengdu Moon, you might only be thinking about aerospace ideas, when in fact, you may want to come up with a different idea. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you what some of my college students I had lectured to in China came up with as a replacement to the Chengdu Moon, and it has nothing to do with aerospace. Innovation tool number 4, look for relationships in the unrelated. So again, this is a tiger that will crouched down, and when it jumps, it arcs over. And that's the same movement as how the stock market moves. So you could take a look at something at the zoo, which would actually apply to the financial markets, completely unrelated. And I encourage you to make observations in one industry and bring it to another. So now let's move into new innovation tools. Innovation tool number 5 is what is missing. So what I encourage you to do with this one is just take a look around the room and ask yourself, what's missing from the room? And a lot of us take things for granted. So for example, if I were actually lecturing you live and we were in the classroom, when I've done this exercise before, and I have done it to over 10,000 people live, typically when I ask people what's missing in the classroom, they come up with things like cup holders, electrical outlets to recharge their phone or their laptop. Women especially want heated seats because they're cold. So, and men actually want air conditioners in the seats. So there was a differential that we got with temperature, but for the most part, heated seats in a classroom setting was really popular when we played the what is missing game. So this is something that you can do with your team as well. Just go into a room and just brainstorm. What would you love to have? A lot of people also, they wanted water. So every time I was giving this lecture and people say, oh, we wish we had some water, the people who had organized the conference, they always went out and got some bottled water and they brought it back to the class. So that was always something I could predict after a while because every class asked for water. So what I encourage you to do right now is just take a look around your own room where you are. Like I'm in this room. What's missing in this room right now? For example, this room right now is not air conditioned, and I wish it was a little bit cooler. So I wish there was air conditioning. However, it would need to be quiet air conditioning. Otherwise, it's going to be recorded, and you're going to hear it, and that's going to disturb you from being able to listen to me. So maybe I just want a cooler room. So let's keep moving. Innovation tool number 6. Now, this is what I call take a why walk. Just simply walk around your community or walk around the room that you're in and question everything. Why is it the way it is? A lot of things are taken for granted. So, for example, when people were not able to walk, well, what did they want to do if they weren't able to walk? They wanted to walk. However, look at this invention, the wheelchair. It's a chair that you sit in and it rolls. And this invention has not really changed significantly since it was invented. It's basically a chair on wheels. But if you ask yourself why, if I can't walk and I want to walk, why would I get a solution that had me sit and roll? I want to walk, I don't want to sit. So what I question is, who invented the wheelchair? Was it someone who couldn't walk? I bet you it wasn't. I think that someone who could walk came up with the idea of a chair that would roll. But really, when people can't walk, what they want to do is walk. So why don't you make not a wheelchair, but something that would roll that allows you to stand? And take a look at this. This is a standing wheelchair. This was created at MIT. There are different versions of it where the wheelchair will actually act as a seat and you can roll like a standard wheelchair. But if you actually want to have the impression that you're walking, the chair will reconfigure itself and then you can actually roll. But this idea would have never happened had someone not questioned what's been around for hundreds of years. And this is where innovation comes in. It's so easy for us to think in standard ways because we're just so used to it. We just assume, oh, it's a wheelchair. And what changes have happened to the wheelchair over the last 100 years? Well, they've made them electric, they've made them more comfortable, they made them look better. Some of them have GPSs in them, but still you're sitting. But this is a real innovation. Now you're standing. You can't even call this a wheelchair anymore. So I encourage you to really question, why are things the way they are? They don't necessarily have to stay that way. And if you want to be innovative, you're going to have to change them. So the why walk is one of my most important innovation tools. Innovation tool number 7 is what I call the plant a 4 a.m. seed. According to neuroscience, one of the most creative times of day is around 4 o'clock in the morning, which is when you may have you've woken up a little bit, you're still in bed, you're probably going to stay in bed for a few more hours, but you're kind of awake. And typically what happens is the most creative ideas come at that time because the conscious brain is for the most part asleep. Those are all the rules that are saying this won't work, you can't do it that way, it's going to be too expensive, how are you going to do this, there's too much competition. All that negative thinking is actually asleep. And the creativity is allowed to come out, and you can start to make relationships in different areas of life that will pop out during your sleep because you don't have that higher level thinking, the negative thinking, stopping you. Another innovation tool to get your brain to stop with the negativity and stop with the rules is to take a yoga class. And with that one, you're spending so much time trying to hold the physical poses as well as breathing and possibly listening to music that you're distracted from your brain. That's actually the purpose of the physical poses in yoga. It's not to be a physical exercise. It was meant to distract your brain from thinking about other things. So yoga, I have found, allows the unconscious mind to kind of think in the background. And usually at the end of yoga class, an idea will just pop into my head. You could do the same thing with swimming or running or some kind of aerobic exercise or any exercise that will take your mind off things. Another one, if you want to do this even faster, is a 3-minute meditation where you turn off all the electronics, you sit in a comfortable chair and close your eyes, and you just very quietly allow yourself to brainstorm and think about the challenge. You know, do the why walk, redesign the chair, and in 3 minutes with total quiet and your eyes closed, that feels like almost an hour. It feels like a long, long time. But what's interesting is that you can come up with some interesting ideas on your own simply through meditation. And the last innovation tool is just gathering odd experiences. Now, what this does is you could have an experience that won't give you a direct result, but it might years later. Now, this is a bridge in New Zealand where you can go bungee jumping. And I actually bungee jumped off this bridge several years ago. And I was really scared. The reason I went was peer pressure. My friends wanted to go, and they went, and so I went. I'm afraid of heights, and I ended up doing it because they wanted me to. I hated it. It was not a good experience. But what happened was I did get physically ill because I was so nervous before I jumped, and I was shaking. I was really scared. And when I finally went, when I actually jumped off the bridge, they videotaped me, and I was laughing hysterically. I don't know why, but as I was bungee jumping and falling through the air, I thought it was funny. And I just kept laughing, and when it was over, it was very, very quick. One thing I didn't realize is that you don't just go down once, that you go down and then you keep bouncing up and down, for several minutes before someone gets you. But here's where the odd experience came from. Here's what I learned from bungee jumping. Two things. One, I don't want to do it again, and I haven't. I didn't really like it. But the big one was the event itself wasn't scary. It was actually fun. Funny, really. But the worry ahead of time was awful. And I've applied that to other things in my life. I don't like going to the dentist and getting a needle. I make a whole nervous thing about it. But the needle itself doesn't really hurt that much. I stub my toe on furniture and I don't get upset. So it's not the pain. What I find is that the worry ahead of time is what's worse. And this is what I've been able to apply to different areas of my life, that when I'm afraid of something, the event is not nearly as bad is the fear of the event ahead of time. That's the awful part. And that has helped me calm down and have less fear over things like getting injections or giving blood when I go to the doctor for blood tests. So gathering odd experiences, even though they may not have a direct benefit to you, could be something that you apply later in life. And so I encourage you not necessarily to go bungee jumping, but do try different experiences and see if you could learn something that could apply to a different industry. Now, here are the 6 positive innovation environments that we're actually looking for. So remember, we're going to get rid of the first 12 innovation killers. So 6 of them are people doing it to you. The other 6 are the way you talk to yourself. So we're going to remove the negativity, but that doesn't necessarily bring in positive innovation, but these 6 will. So imagine a team where, one, you do silent listening. So if one of your team members is talking about an idea, make no comments about it. Just listen. Just listen. You don't say it's a great idea. You don't say it's a bad idea. Here's why. If you say it's a great idea, that's fine. But what if someone next to them doesn't have a good idea and you don't say it's a great idea? They could be upset that they didn't get a compliment. So giving compliments is not encouraged at this stage of the brainstorming format. And certainly don't say anything negative because it could prevent them from talking again. But with silent listening, the odd thing that happens to the person who's speaking is they feel like you agree with them. And it encourages them to come up with more ideas. So silent listening allows people to think that you agree with them when you don't actually, but it puts them in a positive mood, makes them more creative, and more willing to give more ideas. Remember, all ideas are welcome. That is the format. So there are no comments, good or bad, on anyone's ideas. And you establish what's called a negativity-free zone. People cannot interrupt you and say, that won't work, that's not a good idea. What typically happens is the really good idea is going to be so obvious, people say, oh, that's it, that's what we're going to do. And we don't even need to talk about the ideas that didn't make it to the final cut. So it's okay, just let the bad ideas or the not so great ideas just sort of die on their own. We don't need to comment about them. What we do need to do is point out the ideas that are great. And please be vulnerable. When you think about it, someone had to say as an adult that they may have had a problem with controlling their bladder. And that's very embarrassing to talk about that, but that was the invention of the adult diaper, which sells more than baby diapers. So that's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And someone had to be vulnerable to come up with the idea that, you know what, adults need diapers too, not just babies. And please welcome the quiet people in your team, the shy, the quiet. They're great learners, great listeners, great observers, and you really want to know what they've seen. So please welcome the quiet people. And then lastly, it's a judgment-free zone. Just don't make any judgments about what people say. Also, don't make judgments about what they say behind their back at the end of the meeting either. Just simply withhold, you'll judge inside your head, but please don't share that with others, because what we don't want to do is discourage people from contributing, because maybe their first 3 or 4 ideas aren't very good. It's the 5th or 6th idea that's great, and we want to be around for that one. So here's your 20-minute homework. It's an innovation game where you are going to be reinventing a product. So you're going to be gathering 3 to 7 colleagues. Choose a normal everyday item, and you're going to reinvent it for a completely new purpose. So it must be a product that you believe has a consumer market and can be sold as a profit. For example, if this is a drinking glass that holds water, you can keep the same form. It's something that holds water, but it can't be a drinking glass for humans. It needs to do something else. So if you put flowers in it and it became a vase, that would be a repurpose. So just make sure that you take an object, you don't redesign it. What you do is that you repurpose how you're using it. It needs to have a consumer market where you could sell it for a profit. The brainstorming format is that when people go around the room to share their ideas, you say your idea, I think we should turn this into a vase. The person next to you would say, yes, and I think we should make it a pencil holder. Next person says, yes, and I think we should make it a watch holder. So this is the format where yes means I heard you, and here's my idea. It doesn't mean I like your idea or I agree with it, but it allows people to feel good and puts them in a positive mood. So here are some examples to work with before you begin. In the United States and California, we grow this vegetable called artichokes. You may have seen them in China. They're actually not very common in China, but it's a vegetable. It tastes pretty good. And you steam it. And this is a vegetable, this is the artichoke holder. You put it in a pot of water. you boil the water and it steams the artichoke without getting it soggy in the water. So how would you reinvent this? Some of our Harvard students, they turned it into the Kim Kardashian hair bun holder. So the artichoke holder is up inside of her head. So that's one way to repurpose. Another idea to consider, remember from our last lesson, we looked at the Chengdu moon. We're trying to light up the streets at night in Chengdu, but we don't want to have the satellite. We actually haven't even looked at the satellite, but what could we do that would be completely different that would solve the issue? Well, what about combining two existing products? So night vision goggles, this is what some students of mine did in China. They took night vision goggles and sunglasses, and they combined them into designer moon glasses by Louis Vuitton. So you don't even need the satellite. You don't need the disco ball in the air. All you have to do is just wear some moon glasses. So this is the kind of creativity that you can have. So I encourage your team just to dream a little bit, have fun. And again, it's 20-minute homework. You can gather 3 to 7 colleagues, choose a normal everyday item, reinvent it for a completely new purpose. And it needs to be a product that you believe has a consumer market and can be sold for a profit. And I will see you at the next lesson. Take care, everybody.